Welcome to the Marketing Remix, presented by Red Door Interactive. I'm Reed Carr, CEO of Red Door Interactive. Our show is the senior level marketer's resource for navigating our ever-evolving landscape. In each episode, in about 20 minutes, experts from different marketing disciplines representing different buyer touchpoints tackle one important marketing topic. Then, what do you need to know, and how does it affect the buyer? There's something missing in your marketing data. That's what we're here to talk about today with Al Cuyasso. He's a digital analyst here at Red Door Interactive, and Grant Garcia, business manager also at Red Door. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
We don't know exactly who coined the phrase garbage in, garbage out, also known as GIGO, but the term serves as a great metaphor for the relationship between data and marketing. While every enterprise is drowning in data, marketers have a particularly herculean task in wrangling it. A marketer's function becomes even more complex as MarTech stack proliferation and fragmentation causes their data to splinter into more and more silos. Oftentimes the result is garbage in, garbage out, whether it be inaccurate reporting, poor decision-making, and so on. With big data comes big responsibility. So what can brands do to ensure their data doesn't suck? So jumping into this, Al, let's talk a little bit, jump right into some of the trends. What marketing trends are having the biggest impact on data quality right now?
Sure. Well, if you think about it, Reed, 20, 30 years ago, there's only two sources of data that marketers really needed, right? Nielsen data for TV and then whatever else they use for print. But now marketers are getting so much data from different platforms, different sources, and it's all coming in at a very rapid rate from everywhere. So what's the leading trend right now is just the rate of growth of the MarTech stack. There's about 5,000 different data sources and platforms out there where marketers can use to collect their data, learn about their audiences. And I see that as probably the biggest trend right now and why clean data is so important.
Just the volume of it. And Grant, obviously, so now from your perspective as a business manager, you're representing the business on behalf of our clients. So the challenge on their side with all these data sources, what are they facing?
I would say the biggest challenge is just, like you said, Reed, really trying to wrangle that data. More often than not, we see clients, instead of taking that crawl, walk, run approach, they really try to jump into something really technically advanced like personalization without covering their initial bases. I would say that's probably one of the big trends and mistakes that we see. The other one that's really challenging is that more often than not, there's no really good process in place, especially when they start maybe even an initial discovery process. So a lot of times it's one of those things where the data is maybe everybody's job, but nobody's job all at the same time.
Yeah, and so, I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about too is a lot of times it's not just that the data itself is bad, it's just the fact that there's pieces missing from it. I mean, what are the common things that people are missing, or what are some of those hurdles?
It could be anything from as simple as naming conventions for a specific campaign, right? Okay. A lot of our clients have multiple agencies, but they're all running the same campaign. But when you have agency A typing in a campaign UTM parameter one way, and then agency B doing it a different way, the client isn't going to get a holistic view of the amount of traffic they drove through that campaign, the amount they spent to get traffic to their site, or even the amount of revenue they generated.
Right. So keeping everybody on the same page, and you have ad units and media plans and analytics all handled by someone different. It's tough to keep them all on the same page.
And then on the opposite end of that spectrum, when we get a little bit more technical, is being able to track the user throughout the different experiences, right? We're talking about an omni-channel experience where they're going from their phone to their desktop, maybe even reading something offline, right? How do we understand that person's experience is not fragmented? And how can we see their entire journey from consideration, awareness, all the way through to purchase?
Yeah, and there's that for the regular listeners here. There's that funnel again. Ooh. And the funnel comes up a lot. And like you're talking about, I mean, there's sometimes a different stage of the funnel is the mobile device compared to somebody sitting on a desktop. Maybe that's where they purchase and they discover it in a different format. Grant, from the client's perspective, then, we're talking about the consumer. I mean, what's so critical for these marketers to know about the consumer?
Yeah, so I think first, even taking a step back too, it goes back to what is that data that's missing. So specifically about what they're trying to learn about the consumer, I think it's really important first to make sure you're asking the right business questions. So a lot of times with clients, we maybe see that one person who might be in charge of tracking the campaign really is trying to answer a specific business question without having the right stakeholders in the room. So one of the things that we've seen be helpful is to have something similar to key business requirements up front. And so that's really where you're going to ask questions about what you're trying to learn about the visitor. So having that process up front, having the right stakeholders in the room, I think kind of lends itself into getting accurate data on what you're trying to learn about the consumer. But more often than not, I think the main things that they're trying to learn is what is going to take somebody from maybe the learning stage through types of informational content to more of that shopping or conversion stage.
Yeah.
And I think really trying to understand that full conversion path is most often what we're trying to solve for with any data analytics solution.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, as much as we talk about data, I mean, the human component has to come into it, and it seems obvious. And I think, but too often with folks that get either caught up in the the tech stack of it, the data access part of it, even decisions parts of it. But then at the end of the day, it's a human who needs to buy it, and a human who's delivering it, and humans who are working on it.
Right. I think change management is a huge factor here. The technology that is used to try to wrangle all this data and organize it is great. And in the right hands, it can do a lot of good for these businesses. But at the end of the day, you're right, Reed, it really comes down to the planning, the approach, getting buy-in. All of these things need to take place before even thinking about purchasing a tool that's going to help you wrangle all this data.
Yeah, so you're talking about planning, and Grant, you alluded to that too, as well as having obviously the right stakeholders in there. I mean, what are some other things when you get into that planning part of it? What are the things that people need to be thinking about? Grant, from your standpoint, from a stakeholder standpoint, I mean, how do they plan that? Who should show up? And then Al, I want to hear from you about then, before you get into the technology part of it, what should they be thinking about before they start to buy it? So Grant, why don't you start off with that one?
Yeah, that's a great point, Reed. More often than not, we see a lot of clients that we worked with, and I think our audience would be surprised to see it's not just the case with maybe smaller teams, but enterprise clients who see maybe the newest, shiniest analytics or data management platform solution, and they get really easily sold on it. But that might be the Ferrari of analytics solutions, but if it doesn't have an engine in it, or if it's not maintained properly, it's not going to work well. So I think the main things that any client really needs to look at first are, what are you trying to accomplish from a really high level standpoint? For e-commerce clients, it's typically a little bit easier because they can track that full conversion funnel. But for a lot of clients, maybe that is not so easy. And so I think in choosing and selecting a data analytics or data management platform and how you set up that whole overarching process, I think it's important first to ask those key business questions. What are you trying to solve for? What are those problems or challenges that you've had in the past? What do you really want to learn about your consumer or target audience? And then go from there and do really a proper discovery process to make sure that whatever tool you're investing in, you're also going to have the resources to maintain. That's also a really big hiccup that we see a lot of times, is that oftentimes companies will invest in a tool without understanding that they're going to have to hire a significant amount internally or contract out with an agency to maintain that tool. Because like you said, with garbage in, garbage out, the data is really only as good as it is accurate. And if you're not making sure that you're maintaining that data or cleaning it, and if you don't have the resources to support that analytics platform, you're going to be missing out and making incorrect business decisions.
Yeah, and things change over time.
Right. What Grant said is perfect. I think also from a business standpoint, our clients and anybody out there, our audience really has to think about, what are they trying to accomplish with this campaign that they're going to run, right? Or whatever that might be. Understanding what your goal is, as well as what your key performance indicators are, defining those first, and then making sure that you go back and make sure that you have the tracking in place to track against those key performance indicators and ultimately that goal, right? Yeah. Is it awareness? Is it purchases or sales? Whatever that might be, you need to do your due diligence to make sure all of the tracking is accurate and in place.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit about some of that tracking. What are some of these tools? Even at a high level, what tools should be the ones that people are considering categorically?
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, the one that comes to mind is Google Analytics. Getting everybody on the same page as far as the campaign and UTM tracking parameters you're going to be using. Oftentimes when it comes to report on a campaign, you're sifting through all these different labels for sources of data, mediums, campaign names even. And all of that takes time, really reduces efficiency of the approach. And also you're going to be delivering dirty data if nothing is uniformed, right? There's also other things that our audience could do by really harnessing, I think, once they've graduated from the approach of collecting this data and categorizing it. But once they're able to harness all that data using a business intelligence platform like Domo to easily report on all of that and to democratize that data is extremely important as well, right? You can't really have a data hoard. The data isn't going to do you any good if you have somebody hoarding it, or if they're not fast enough in dispersing that information. So a lot of that really takes part in what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Grant, in terms of then the democratization of the data and how we're going to apply that, I mean, you're having regular conversations with clients. How do you know you have the right or the wrong KPIs in place? What are some of the parameters around understanding the data as we get it in real time?
Yeah, great question. I think especially if it's a new platform or maybe a new process or relationship, the most important thing is going to be making sure that the key stakeholders understand what different segments or metrics are, and especially what they aren't. So a lot of times there's miscommunication around, even between analytics platforms. Page view or page visit in Google Analytics is technically different than Adobe Analytics, and that's going to be even more different across other analytics platforms. Or even if we're looking at site load time or time on site, things like that, those metrics really vary across platforms. And so if someone might be used to one analytics platform, when they go over to another one or make a switch or switch jobs, there's going to be a little bit of a misunderstanding. So I would say that the biggest thing up front is just making sure that everybody understands what the metrics are and agree to them, and everybody understands what they're trying to answer with those metrics.
Yeah. So it's kind of a glossary kind of issue sometimes. I mean, from looking at it from, if you had a certain experience or something, you maybe think that means one thing, whereas someone else had a different experience, it means something else, depending on Google Analytics or Adobe or some of the other platforms.
Right. Not only that, but you also have departments that have different goals sometimes too, right? I mean, when your organization may not be as focused on the same goal, these things occur. Right. I think having this conversation that Grant is informing us about right now, that's important, just to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. Well, so now we're talking about a lot of on-site stuff. I mean, all the 5,000 different data sources that you're talking about there too. What are some other things that people need to be thinking about from a MarTech stack, marketing technology stack, as relates to some of those? I know people have been talking about MDMs, DMPs, which obviously we should unacronymize some of those.
Well, with MDM, master data management, there are definitely platforms out there that can help you do that. But what we're really trying to accomplish is the data quality, right? Yeah. Making sure that all of the sources that we're pulling data from is cleaned, organized, and we have it warehoused and ready to go whenever it's needed for reporting.
Right.
And MDM, it's really great at scaling all of that data. I mean, we're talking about velocity of the data that's being collected, the variety of data. A good plan and master data management is really going to put you in a good space to really harness all that information and be able to use it.
Yeah.
And of course, there's also DMPs, and with those, I think those are things that every marketer is aware of now. Where
and a DMP is
so data management platforms are something that all marketers are aware of, and these really help you help all marketers harness all of their data. I think marketers we're in a space where we're getting data from all kinds of sources that are coming in different schemas and different forms.
Yep.
Well, these DMPs, the data management platforms, really help us understand how to use that data and also help tie things together so we can follow and track a user from mobile to desktop to purchase, also any offline behavior. And through those DMPs, we could start constructing an audience, a segment, and then apply that to personalization and changing the experiences of our audience based on what their interests are.
Yeah. And then that, so people understand too, is that's where then it takes it from the site into how it affects your media. It affects the conversion rate because you now are serving different content to people on the website. So we're getting back to the using data to identify the humans, the people out there, and then how do you reach them and connect with them and break through the noise and the clutter and that sort of thing. The other part that's so fascinating to me, as I've obviously gotten more and more into this stuff too, is what kind of data we can get on consumers. You have the stuff you have, right? We talk about the MDM aspect of it as it relates to probably predominantly your own data, but then we're able to accumulate data from external sources to then append this. So maybe Grant, talk a little bit about how some of that is applied. And the power of some of that once you do have, in the promise of this clean data, what can we do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from the thing that comes to mind, I would say most clearly is probably what Facebook is able to do with their lookalike audiences. So from a social standpoint, we're really able to see not only overarching themes around how people are engaging with various ad types or how campaigns are performing, but we can also upload things like lookalike audiences. And what that allows us to do is really, for example, Al and I are pretty similar. We have similar hobbies. Therefore, I might be in a lookalike audience with Al. And so we can use that data to target people that are similar to those that we know have already engaged with some piece of content that we've released. And Facebook is constantly making investment in the data that they're purchasing so that they can also have a clear picture of your buying habits, how much money you have, demographic data. So we're able to harness that to better target people. And ultimately what that delivers is more relevant advertising. So even though it is a little bit Big Brother, I think Al would probably rather see an ad that's focused on fly fishing, and so would I, right? Because that's a common hobby that we have. Versus, maybe I probably don't need to see an ad about wedding dresses.
Whatever you're into, man. And that's a great application of it. I mean, that's the promise of it. That's what marketing was supposed to do so long ago. I mean, but it was it's pretty broadcast at the time, one to many. Compared to where we are now is this idea of mass personalization. So personalization at scale. And I think that's what we're talking about here is with this, to a degree, once we get this right, you can start doing that and better target the creative. I think it's a better experience from the consumer level because you are getting what you want to see. So all around it's helping people out. So, kind of some final thoughts about, what these marketers should be thinking about as it relates to how you maybe have seen data quality or lack thereof manifest itself, and maybe some parting words on that.
Yeah. So, any examples of when we've seen, I guess, this go haywire and see it all go wrong, or the good version of that?
Any of that?
I think. One case that really comes to mind is I brought this up earlier about campaigns and not being able to really get a good report and a good insight into not only how the campaign performed, but also what can you do differently next time, right? I think that's just as important of a question to ask when after a campaign closes. And one thing that issue that really comes to mind is we have some clients that are really hot on business intelligence right now, right? They want to harness all of the data they have, use it. They want it faster. They want it now. But we want to make sure that we're dispersing that data in a very clear way that's accurate. And we, most importantly, we want trust in whoever is viewing that data. And when it all comes down to is, I think larger organizations have a much more difficult task ahead of them in wrangling all these people. And I think one case that comes to mind is with one of our clients that is a very multinational organization. They have different they have different offices all around the world, multiple marketing agencies. How do they wrangle all those people, right? How do they organize them to really give them the clean data that they need? And that's something that we've come into contact with quite frequently, and having to go through that data, clean it as much as possible, and then report out on it in order to gain that trust is key. But also the efficiency that's there lost there. That's something that we're continually focusing on and trying to improve.
Yeah, I mean, spinning your wheels on this sort of thing would, highly inefficient, but also can be pretty damaging.
Right.
Grant, any parting words for the marketers listening to us right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really anybody that's working in this space probably has some horror stories of maybe campaigns that they've seen launched without any campaign tracking on it.
Yeah.
And maybe, on the client side, maybe not having a great QA process in place to catch issues like that really quickly. So not to talk about those too much, but to talk about with clients that we've seen this done really well, what that looks like in effect is that you're able to really segment within your analytics data, especially if somebody's coming to the site that's new and maybe hasn't engaged with your business before, versus someone that is an existing customer that might be coming to log in or has shopped on the site before, and being able to segment the experiences appropriately for those two different audiences. I think that's really what we're trying to get to is, like you said, Reed, not delivering this one-to-many experience, but using data and analytics to really deliver a one-to-one experience based on where you are either in the funnel or how experienced you are with that brand. And those are typically the clients that we're better able to impact and pivot either campaigns or marketing strategy appropriately.
Awesome. Well, guys, really appreciate you joining us. Al, Grant, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, for those of you listening, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Appreciate the time that you spend with us as well. We got a follow-up blog post on this, so check out our blog post on data quality. There's going to be some helpful tips there and things you can apply to make your data even better and more powerful. So remember, it's a one-to-one. Mass personalization is the name of the game, and that's where we're headed, and good data will help you get there. So thank you.